Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a time when warmth wasn't a thermostat click away, but something you had to earn layer by layer, breath by breath, one chilly night at a time. Picture this. It's a pitch black morning in a small medieval village, maybe somewhere in northern France or the English countryside. There's no sun yet, just a pale haze creeping over frozen thatch roofs. You're lying stiff under a scratchy wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep and old smoke, your breath visibly rising in the frigid air like you're exhaling ghosts. The floor is just packed earth. Your toes are numb, your fingers won't move properly, and you can't decide if standing up will make things better or worse. This is winter for a peasant, and spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what's the temperature where you are right now, and what time are you watching this? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your back aches from the straw mattress, which may or may not contain actual straw anymore. It started as straw, but weeks of shifting and sweat have compacted it into something closer to damp felt. If you're lucky, it's been stuffed with a few dried herbs to mask the smell. If you're really lucky, no mice have taken up residence in the bottom corners. You shift under the heavy woolen coverlet, which is so thick it might as well be a rug. It's itchy, coarse, it sheds. And it still isn't quite enough. The cold here isn't dramatic like a blizzard in a film. It's quiet, creeping. It seeps into your bones during the night, curls around your knees, and nestles into your chest. There's a reason many peasants didn't bother getting out of bed until they absolutely had to. And no, not in a cute, cozy morning kind of way. More like, if I move, I'll snap in half. You shift again and bump into someone. Of course, you're not alone in this bed. It's maybe a wooden platform with rope supports and one old feather pillow between 3 or 4 people, your siblings, or your parents, or your snoring grandfather who smells like boiled onions. Families slept together for warmth. Children on the inside, adults forming a barricade of body heat on the outside. There wasn't any room for modesty, just survival. You spooned whoever was warmest and hoped for the best. In wealthier households, you might have had a fireplace in the bedroom, but you? No chimney, no hearth. Just a central fire pit out in the main room, if you even had that. It would have been banked down overnight, covered in ash to preserve embers till morning. Which means the rest of the cottage is just cold, damp, and very, very dark. You roll onto your side, trying to minimize skin exposure. There's a draft creeping through the door, which is really just a few planks held together with rope and hope. And the walls, made of wattle and daub, packed with straw and mud, don't exactly scream insulated. You could seal the gaps with rags or animal fat, maybe plug holes with moss if you were desperate. But that only helps so much. Wind still got in. Cold always found a way. You listen closely. A rooster crows too early, as usual. You groan softly and pull the blanket tighter. You hear a distant cough, then a sneeze. Everyone is always sneezing in winter. The air is damp. Your nose runs constantly, but you don't have a handkerchief, just your sleeve. Or your neighbor's sleeve if they're asleep. One of the more debated details among historians is just how cold it truly got inside peasant cottages. There's some evidence based on archaeological remains and medieval text that indoor temperatures during winter often hover just a few degrees above freezing. But others argue that with enough bodies, livestock, and a decently maintained thatched roof, things might have been tolerable if not quite cozy. Quaint paintings from the later medieval period sometimes show cottages glowing with warmth, but those were often idealized scenes, drawn by people who'd never spent a night on a cold dirt floor. Peasants didn't usually get to narrate their own stories. What we do know is that frostbite was a familiar visitor, especially in the extremities, ears, fingers, toes. And chilblains, those painful, itchy swellings from repeated cold exposure, were as common as mud. Here's a weird tidbit. Some peasants reportedly ate snow to help numb toothaches, which tells you something about their access to medicine and warmth. Others used snow to keep them cool, or more often, just accepted that it was going to freeze in the bucket overnight. You finally swing your legs out of bed, one toe at a time. The floor is biting cold. You fumble for your boots, stiff leather things stuffed with hay or scraps of cloth, because socks are for nobles and your feet are basically unpaid interns. You pull on your tunic over your nightshirt, same tunic you wore yesterday. And the day before, it's thick, but not thick enough. So you add a cloak and a scarf made from an old flour sack. Then you just stand there for a minute, wrapped like a human turnip, trying to remember why you even got out of bed in the first place. Someone stirs behind you, a groan, a muttered complaint about the cold. You nod, even though they can't see you. Everyone's cold. Everyone's always cold. But for now, there's bread to toast near the hearth, or what's left of it. And maybe, if you're very lucky, the neighbor's goat hasn't eaten your gloves again. The sun still hasn't made a proper appearance by the time you step out of bed and cross the threshold into the main room. Not that there's much of a threshold, it's more of a loose patch of woven rushes meant to catch the mud off your feet, though it mostly just holds it in place. Your breath puffs visibly in front of your face again, and you shuffle toward the hearth, which is now just a soft gray mound of ash and cold-looking embers. No crackling fire, no dancing flames. Just the memory of heat and a few lingering smells. Charred cabbage, damp wood, and something suspiciously like burnt boot leather. You kneel beside the hearth and nudge the ashes with a stick, gently sifting for any ember still clinging to life. This is a delicate operation. Fire's not something you casually waste. A good ember can mean the difference between a warm meal and raw onions. You blow softly, lips pursed, coaxing a faint glow back into something like purpose. A few sparks flicker. Good. Now you heap a bit of dry brush over the top, if you remembered to bring some in the night before, and maybe a chip of peat if you're lucky. Wood, proper wood, is a luxury. You don't burn logs unless you're rich or desperate. Most days, you burn whatever burns. Dried animal dung, straw, twigs, bits of broken furniture, sometimes even bundled rags if someone died recently and left behind some extra cloth. Let's talk walls, because they're doing nothing to help you here. Your home is made of wattle and daub, thin wooden branches woven together and plastered with a paste of clay, dung, and straw. It's clever, really, and surprisingly durable, but insulation? Not its strong suit. The wind finds its way through the smallest cracks. Cold leaks in like gossip through a church pew. The thatched roof above your head is thick, sometimes more than a foot deep, made of tightly packed reeds or straw. When it's dry and properly layered, thatch does a decent job of keeping the rain out, but it doesn't keep in the warmth. It breathes, and that's part of the problem. Heat rises and just keeps going straight through the roof and out into the clouds, as if it has somewhere better to be. You tuck your cloak closer and glance up at the ceiling. If you're lucky, your cottage has a smoke hole, a crude sort of chimney designed to let smoke out without letting too much cold in. If you're not lucky, and you aren't, it's just a hole. Birds sometimes fall through, or worse, rats. You shudder and look back down. A rat landing in your soup isn't even the worst case scenario. The worst is when you're asleep and it lands on your face. And then there's the floor, just packed earth. Cold, damp, and usually not even level. You've tried spreading rushes or straw across it to make things more comfortable, but that stuff breaks down fast. After a week or so, it just turns into damp compost underfoot. Some folks add herbs like lavender or pennyroyal to the floor, rushes to keep bugs away and make the air smell better. It helps, sort of. At least the fleas are slightly more fragrant. You sit on a low stool near the hearth, fingers extended toward the hopeful flickers of warmth. Your toes are still numb and your nose is starting to drip. That's just part of winter life: runny noses, endless sneezing, and that scratchy cough that shows up sometime in November and refuses to leave until the lambs are born. Historians still argue whether peasant homes were always this cold, or whether regional differences made a bigger impact than we assume. Some archaeologists argue that tightly packed villages and thatch-roofed cottages provided enough body heat retention to keep people warm enough. Others suggest that people simply acclimated to being cold nearly all the time. There was no real escape from it. You lived with it. You endured. You listened to the soft creaking of the roof beams as the wind brushes against the house. Somewhere, a neighbor is chopping ice from a water barrel. You hear it, the dull thud of wood against frozen slush. You make a mental note to go check your own water pot. If it's frozen solid, that's an entire hour wasted just getting water this morning. Again. And still, there's no real sun. Just a sort of pewter glow sliding across the horizon. You tug your cloak tighter, then reach for your linen cap, the one you sleep in and sometimes wear all day, depending on the weather. It keeps your ears from freezing off and hides the fact that your hair hasn't been properly washed since sometime before the last feast day. A low grunt behind you lets you know someone else has woken up. It's your brother. He drags himself from the bed, wearing his tunic, last night's socks, and an expression of mild betrayal at being alive. He makes the same slow shuffle over to the hearth and joins you, hands outstretched, eyes closed. Neither of you speaks. It's too early for words, and you're still conserving warmth. Here's a curious little detail. In some regions, peasants would actually insulate their homes using cow dung, mostly, or horse if you were unlucky. Not just for fuel, but to literally plaster the walls and patch cracks. It dries hard, smells mostly earthy once cured, and repels wind surprisingly well. Imagine sitting in a room held together by poop and prayer, hoping the roof doesn't cave in when it snows. But hey, it works. A scratching sound by the door reminds you of another warmth source: livestock. Pigs, chickens, even the family goat sometimes spent the night indoors with you. Not because you loved their company, but because they radiated body heat like little smelly furnaces. Plus, letting them sleep outside in freezing temperatures was a good way to lose a meal, so you shared your space. Chickens tucked into corners, pigs curled up on straw by the wall, and you tried not to roll over onto a hoof in the middle of the night. Of course, this wasn't some idyllic rustic cuddle party. Animals indoors meant fleas, lice, droppings, and a very particular smell. The air inside your cottage would be thick not with warmth, but with steam and odor. You'd wake with your throat dry and your nose offended, but you'd be alive. And that's what counts. And still you wait. Wait for the fire to properly catch. Wait for the cold in your chest to retreat. Wait for the day to begin, though it already has. You stretch your hands, now tingling from the blood returning to your fingers. The fire is stronger, now tiny orange flames licking the bottom of the pot. It's enough for now. Enough to survive the morning. The fire finally begins to take hold, just enough to warm the very tips of your fingers. And for a brief, flickering moment, your breath doesn't fog the air quite so visibly. You lean closer, feeling the heat slowly push back the frost that's crept into your joints. Your brother shifts beside you, murmuring something about breakfast, but you both know that's a generous word for what's ahead. Yesterday's bread, hardened to the texture of roof tile, and a bit of thin porridge if someone remembered to soak the oats overnight. But before that, there's the matter of clothing, or rather, staying in your clothing. Because in this life, your tunic is your best friend, your blanket, and in many cases, your only real defense against the icy air that seems to find you no matter what. You didn't get dressed this morning. You were already dressed in layers that rarely come off during the colder months. The medieval peasant had no pajamas. Nightwear was just your daytime clothes, slightly more wrinkled and even more determined not to be removed. Most days, you wear a base shift or shirt made from coarse linen, probably passed down from someone else, and likely repaired multiple times with the sort of stitching that suggests desperation more than skill. Over that, a wool tunic thick, scratchy, and the color of faded mud, because it was mud originally. Dyes were expensive. Most peasants didn't waste them on clothes meant for digging turnips and emptying chamber pots. Your legs are wrapped in woolen hose, or at least they were when you owned 2 matching ones. Today, it's more of a patchwork situation. One leg wrapped in something vaguely sock-like, the other in strips of cloth tied off with twine. Your shoes? Wooden solace, leather uppers, and packed with straw to keep the cold from biting straight through the bottom. Some folks stuffed theirs with moss, or even warm ashes if they were desperate. You tried that once. It didn't go well. The cloak you wear indoors isn't ceremonial, it's survival. You don't remove it unless you absolutely must, and even then, only with a deep sigh and some degree of mourning. It's heavy, smells of smoke, and trails hay wherever you go. But it holds in warmth like nothing else. Some cloaks were lined with fur, though that luxury was rare among the poorer villagers. You're grateful if the wool isn't still damp from yesterday's rain. And speaking of wet clothing, drying things is its own winter challenge. There are no radiators, no dryers. You hang things by the hearth and pray they're dry by morning. The result: you often walk around in slightly damp garments, especially underlayers that cling and chill in all the wrong places. And yet you keep them on. Removing them would be madness. One of your greatest weapons against the cold is the shared heat of other humans. This is no time for personal space. Sleeping, sitting, even working close together was common and necessary. Parents, children, and often extended family piled together in a tangle of limbs and cloaks. It wasn't comfortable, and you could forget privacy, but it meant surviving to see another spring. There's an old saying, still murmured today in parts of rural Europe: warm is the bed with 3, cold is the bed with 1. It's not poetic. It's just true. Historians debate how often medieval people washed their clothes, especially in winter. Some argue peasants washed more than we assume, given their proximity to rivers and communal fountains. Others suggest that washing meant stripping down in frigid air, beating your linens on rocks, and waiting days for them to dry. And winter? Not worth it. You waited. You wore your clothes until they stiffened or walked off on their own. The smell was the price of survival. Here's a fun fringe fact. In colder areas, peasants sometimes warmed their clothes before putting them on, especially if they'd gone without a fire the night before. They'd lay a tunic or shirt near the embers for a few moments, not too long. Or you'd end up with a smoking sleeve and then dress quickly while the fabric still held the ghost of heat. Some even tucked garments under their mattresses or into their bedding so they'd be semi-warm by morning. It didn't make a huge difference, but it helped. Then there were the truly creative methods. In some regions, people slept with stones that had been heated in the fire and wrapped in cloth primitive hot water bottles. Others stuffed straw or wool between layers of clothing to trap more body heat. And if you were lucky enough to own one, a lined hood, what we'd now call a coif, could keep your ears intact even when the wind howled like an offended goose. But for most people, warmth came down to routine. Keep your cloak on, keep moving, keep close to others. Even indoors, there was rarely true stillness. You fidgeted, you paced. You mended socks with frozen fingers and cooked meals standing up just to stay warm. The cold was always there, pressing against your skin, curling around your ankles, whispering through the cracks in the walls. And when you had to sit still, like when you ate or sewed, or listened to someone recite a bit of scripture or gossip, you bundled tight, you hugged your knees. You pulled your cloak over your head like a turtle retreating into its shell. You pressed your hands to your cheeks or your thighs, wherever skin still felt human. Did medieval people get cold injuries often? Probably more than we know. Frostbite, while not always explicitly recorded, was certainly a risk, especially for those spending long hours in fields, forests, or tending livestock outdoors. And for those indoors, the lack of ventilation meant damp air, constant coughing, and illnesses made worse by the cold. But they endured. And not because they were tougher than us, but because there was no other choice. You shift your cloak one more time and glance toward the door. Outside, the light has sharpened slightly, tinged now with a bit of gold. Morning, such as it is. The chickens are scratching near the hearth again, and someone's child has begun crying in the neighbor's cottage. Your breath still fogs in front of your face, but your shoulders feel warmer now. Your body has adjusted. Your clothing, stiff and awkward as it may be, has begun to trap the heat you've earned. And for now, just for now, you are warm enough. You step outside the cottage, the wooden door groaning on its hinges as it opens, and are immediately met with a slap of morning air so cold it feels personal. It stings your face, numbs your fingers despite your gloves, or more accurately, your patched wool mittens with the tips worn through, and sets your teeth on edge in a way that coffee never could. If coffee were even a thing for you, which it isn't. What you do have, though, is livestock, and not just for eggs or milk. These animals are part of your winter survival strategy, whether you like it or not. Chickens, a goat if you're lucky, maybe a pig, and a couple of sheep if you're very lucky. You don't keep them in a barn, that would be too easy. You keep them with you inside the cottage because they generate body heat, and body heat is currency in the medieval winter economy. You glance back inside where the pig is still snoring contentedly by the hearth, steam rising gently from its back like it's a loaf of bread fresh from the oven. It's oddly comforting, in the same way that the sound of rain is comforting, right until you remember it's also peeing on your floor. You'll deal with that later. Bringing animals indoors wasn't some quirky rural habit, it was necessity. A pig, after all, gives off as much warmth as a small child and doesn't complain nearly as much. Chickens cluster together for warmth and radiate heat in their own feathered way. You build a pen out of rough-hewn boards in the corner, maybe throw down some straw, and accept that you're basically sharing a bedroom with your breakfast. There are even medieval records of cows being brought into the central hall of larger peasant homes during severe weather. Not for shelter, well, yes, for shelter, but mostly because of the heat. A full-grown cow can raise the temperature of a small room by several degrees. In fact, some early Scandinavian longhouses were designed with a clear purpose in mind: keep the humans and the cows under one roof. And everyone benefits from the mutual insulation. Not cozy, not hygienic, but very practical. Historians still argue whether these multi-species sleeping arrangements were common across all medieval cultures or more localized to colder regions. Some believe it was more frequent in mountainous or northern areas where snow could trap communities indoors for days or weeks. Others suggest that even in milder climates, poor families kept smaller animals close by out of sheer necessity. The truth likely varies by region, but what remains consistent is this: when it came to warmth, peasants got very creative. There's also a bit of folklore around animal warmth. Some people believed that certain animals gave off cleaner heat than others. Dogs, for instance, were prized not just as guards, but as warm companions. Not that every peasant had a dog lying loyally at their feet. More often than not, it was a scrappy village mutt with fleas and an attitude, curling up by the door and growling at the pig if it got too close. But pigs were the real stars of the winter home, despite the smell. They were valuable, yes, but also weirdly affectionate in their own way until they weren't. You remember the story old Marta told last winter about her cousin's pig that bit him on the ankle because it didn't want to be moved from the hearth. He got an infection, the pig got dinner. Life is full of circles like that. You shift your weight and step gingerly around a patch of frozen mud as you check the goat pen. Your goat named something uncreative like Nanny or Belle, is chewing on something that was probably rope, bleating softly with indignation at the cold. You nod in sympathy. You get it. You feel the same way. Animals weren't just a warm presence. They were a kind of living alarm clock. Chickens made noise. Goats stomped and brayed. And pigs. Pigs will let you know immediately if they're unhappy, hungry, or bored, which in winter is often all three at once. But their breath alone, a snorting puff of steam each time they exhale, can help stave off the iciness that settles in the corners of your home when the wind howls too long. Speaking of wind, you hear it picking up again, rustling the thatch and rattling the wooden shutters that don't quite close. You tug your hood tighter. No amount of livestock is going to make the outside world any less brutal today. You make a mental list. Water needs fetching, the henhouse door is frozen again, and someone has to empty the chamber pot, which has also developed a charming little ice cap. You glance at the rising sun, or more accurately, the lighter patch of clouds where the sun should be, and sigh. Time to get moving. But before you do, you lean in and scratch the pig gently behind its ear. It grunts approvingly. There's a moment of shared warmth between species, a simple transaction, heat for safety. You protect them, they keep you from freezing. It's not love. It's not even affection, really. It's collaboration, medieval style. Back inside, the hearth is alive again. A modest flame flickers, and the pot hanging above it begins to steam gently. Not quite soup, more like hot water with ambition. But you'll add whatever scraps you have, a sliver of onion, some mulled barley, maybe even a turnip if you're feeling festive. Warmth doesn't just come from the fire itself, but from the things it makes possible. Warm food, warm drink, the illusion of comfort. The pig lumbers over and flops down near the hearth, displacing a chicken that had been making herself comfortable. The chicken hops indignantly onto a stool, where she will eventually lay an egg or not. You haven't figured out the schedule yet. You sit down with them because this is your version of central heating. A fire that smells faintly of dung, a pig at your feet, and a half-boiled root in your hands. It's not luxury, it's survival. And in its own strange way, it's enough. Your brother mutters something about the goat chewing the laundry again. You shrug, let her. At least she's not chewing you. You pull your cloak tighter, lean toward the fire, and inhale the faint aroma of whatever this meal is becoming. The air inside the cottage is still chilly, but less so now. The breath from the animals, the body heat of your family, the slow build of the fire, it all adds up. You begin to thaw, inch by inch. Here's a weird little practice you remember. Some villagers carried small animals with them when they ventured out on especially cold days. A chicken under the arm, a kitten inside a tunic, anything that moved and breathed and warmed. One old man in your village used to walk around with a rabbit in each sleeve. You thought he was mad, then you tried it once. And you understood. And you think about that as the wind picks up again and rattles the loose shutter, and the goat finally gives up chewing rope and lays down near the door. You've been awake for only a little while, but already the cold seems manageable. Not gone, not conquered, just quiet for now. Held at bay by animals, ash, and sheer determination. The sun barely peeks over the horizon by the time you're pulling on your stiff leather boots. The ones that are more holes than boot now, and lacing them tightly with bits of twine. They never did fit right, and after 3 winters, they've molded to your feet in all the wrong ways. Still, they're better than going barefoot on the frost-covered ground, which some poor souls still do. The fire is down to embers. You stirred it earlier with a poker, blew gently into its glowing heart, and tossed on a few slivers of dried cow dung. Yes, actual dung. Again, just enough to keep it breathing until you return. There's no firewood to spare today. You need to make your way to the commons to collect kindling, a daily ritual that's part chore, part race against your neighbors, and part desperate gamble. You step outside into air that stings the inside of your nose. Frost clings to every twig, every fence post, even the goat's beard. She looks unimpressed, as always. Your breath hangs in the air like a ghost following you, and each step on the frozen earth echoes louder than it should, as if the cold has swallowed all the other sounds. The forest is about half a mile away closer if you cut through old Thomas's field, but he keeps an eye out even in winter. He swears people steal firewood from his bundles, and he's not wrong. People do. Sometimes it's you. Today, though, you're not aiming for branches. You're out for what might generously be called thermal trash. Bark, twigs, dried moss, dead leaves if you're lucky. Firewood in winter is scarce. Peasants like you rarely had the right to cut trees, even the ones growing on what looks like public land. Most of the surrounding woods are owned by a lord, a monastery, or someone else far more powerful than you. There's a law probably written down somewhere fancy that makes it illegal to fell living trees without permission. And getting permission? Let's just say it doesn't happen often. The best you can hope for is gathering windfall, branches that break off naturally, debris from storms, or the occasional rotted stump. Even then, there are forest wardens, and they do patrol. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants obeyed these woodland laws out of fear or habit, or whether enforcement was really that strict. Some claim local lords turned a blind eye in harsher winters. Others say entire families were fined, or worse, for cutting down a tree without approval. Whatever the truth, you know this: you've seen people punished, and it's not a risk you take lightly. So you settle for scraps? Bark peeling from birch trees, little piles of dried needles under pine roots, bundles of dead twigs you can break by hand and bundle in your cloak. It's slow work, your hands going numb even through the makeshift mittens, but there's something rhythmic about it. One pile, then another. One more stick to warm you for 5 more minutes. And then there's turf. A soggy, muddy option in other seasons, but by now it's hardened and brittle. You remember helping your older brother cut slabs of peat from the wetland last autumn, stacking them neatly to dry. Some people mock peat as a poor man's fuel. Those people have never been truly cold. Peat fires don't burn hot, but they burn long. A thick slab will sit in your hearth and smolder like a sullen beast, giving off just enough heat to take the edge off. It smells like earth, like mushrooms and mildew and something vaguely metallic. Not pleasant, but oddly reassuring. Like the ground itself is trying to keep you alive. When you finally turn back home, your arms are full. A bit of peat, a handful of twigs, maybe even a half-rotted log with one good dry corner. You walk faster now. The cold is setting in deeper, and your cloak woven from rough wool and patched in 4 places no longer seems enough. Each gust of wind sneaks through your layers like a gossip with a secret. By the time you see your cottage again, the light in the small window glows golden. Someone has fed the fire. You hope it's not the pig. You duck inside quickly, shaking frost from your hood and stomping your boots against the doorframe. The warmth hits you like a wall, not much, but enough to remind you what discomfort really means. You toss the fuel onto the pile near the hearth, dust your hands, and sit. The children are gathered nearby, wrapped in shared blankets. You can see their breath as they talk, as they laugh at something, probably the goat, who's now lying suspiciously close to the bundle of kindling. You give her a look. She bleats, which you assume is goat for try me. Then comes the delicate business of fire maintenance. You can't just throw on all the fuel and hope for the best. You layer it, a few dry twigs, some crumbled peat dust, a pinch of old straw. Light it gently, shield it from the draft. Let it catch slowly. This isn't a bonfire. It's a whisper of warmth. You remember a neighbor once telling you that some families burn dried animal bones. Not for the heat, there's almost none in it, but for the ritual of something in the hearth. A symbol. A psychological trick. People will burn anything if it means light and even the illusion of heat. Dried dung, scraps of leather, even old thatch pulled from a leaky roof. Waste not, freeze not. There's an old saying in your village: 1 stick for the toes, 2 for the nose, and 3 to keep you breathing. It's nonsense, probably made up by someone half mad from the cold. But still, you repeat it quietly as you feed the fire. Outside, it's already growing dark again. Winter days are short, and medieval winters, shorter still. There's barely time to gather, cook, eat, and repair your tools before the chill returns in full. But inside now, there's a flickering light. The room feels less like a trap and more like a cave primitive, sure, but protective. You lean closer to the hearth. The flames are low, but steady. They crackle quietly, almost politely. Someone hands you a bowl of porridge, thin and barely warm, but still comforting. You take a spoonful, and for a moment, you can almost pretend you're warm, almost. The night ahead will be long. The cold will seep back in as it always does. But for now, you have fire. You have family. You have goat stolen kindling probably, but let's not dwell on that. And you have the strange medieval knowledge that no matter how freezing the world gets, there's always one more scrap to burn, one more trick to try, one more hour to survive. The wind whistles under the door again as evening settles in like a damp woolen blanket. You press a rag into the gap near the threshold, the same way you did last night and the night before that, and every night since the first frost. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. In winter, better than nothing is a luxury. You take a look around the single room you live in. The walls are timber and daub wattle woven sticks smeared with a hearty blend of mud, straw and dung, and in places, you can see tiny cracks where the daub has flaked away. The wind finds those cracks. You try not to think about how many there are. Instead, you get up, pull a ragged piece of old cloth from a basket, and start plugging one with your fingers. Then another. Then another. This is your insulation system, primitive, handmade, and probably ineffective by modern standards, but it's the best you have. You've even pushed straw between the wall timbers and the thatched roof above your head, hoping to catch the heat before it floats up and out into the frozen nothingness. Some nights, you lie awake and feel that heat leaving your body, lifting into the rafters like your soul preparing to abandon ship. One of the kids sneezes, a sharp little chirp that cuts the quiet. You glance over and notice she's shivering, her feet wrapped in layers of cloth. You dig out a second pair of woven wool hose, slightly damp, but not yet stiff, and pull them onto her legs with fingers that now move slower than you'd like. She smiles a sleepy thank you, and for a moment, your chest aches with something warmer than fire. You sit back on the wooden bench. It wobbles under your weight as if offended. A few of the other children are asleep already, curled near the hearth like cats. Their heads rest against folded cloaks, their hands buried in the crooks of their arms. Sleeping close together is essential, not sentimental survival. In the worst part of winter, it's not uncommon for entire families to pile into the same bed, or floor mat, or hay nest, limbs tangled like roots, just to keep body heat from escaping. Historians still argue whether this kind of group sleeping was more of a cultural norm or a desperate necessity. Did people bond more because they slept shoulder to shoulder each night? Or did it simply make sense in a world where losing body heat could mean losing toes or worse? You glance at the ceiling again, that thatch. You've spent whole summers patching it, stuffing it, waterproofing it with whatever you could find. A leaky roof in winter doesn't just mean wet heads. It means damp everything, damp food, damp bedding, damp shoes that never dry and slowly eat away at your skin. So every autumn, out came the ladder and the new straw, and up you went. Just another day in the endless fight against cold. The thatch holds for now. You know, it will start to mold come March, but that's a problem for later. Today, it's dry. Today, it's a minor miracle. A neighbor once swore by hanging dried herbs in the rafters lavender. Yarrow and something unidentifiable he claimed kept the spirits of cold from settling in the walls. You tried it once, hanging bundles of mugwort and garlic. The garlic kept away rats. The mugwort just made the cottage smell like damp tea. But you kept the ritual alive, half for superstition, half because doing something feels better than doing nothing. Another trick you've picked up over the years is layering your clothes at night, not just on yourself, but everywhere. Cloaks become makeshift curtains, sacks get stuffed into drafty corners, and you've even been known to wrap your wooden spoon handles in rags to keep them from freezing your hands at breakfast. You sit near the fire, now just red coals and the occasional crackle, and start to wrap your own feet. You've got socks under hose, hose under trousers, trousers under a patched tunic. Over that, a coarse wool cloak you borrowed permanently from a merchant's broken down cart 2 winters ago. You're wrapped like a sausage, a slightly damp, itchy sausage, but at least the cold has to work harder to reach your bones. Outside, wolves howl. Not close yet, but not far either. You shift uneasily. The livestock are penned in, the pig is snoring, and the chickens are huddled in a straw box near the door. But wolves get hungry too, and snow makes them bolder. You remember stories of winter wolves prowling the edges of villages, picking off stragglers, even scratching at cottage doors. Most likely exaggerations, but the idea still lives in your spine. Wolves and cold too reminders that nature doesn't care about your comfort, or your children, or your thatch roof, or your rags stuffed in wall cracks. Nature only cares whether you're strong or lucky enough to make it through the night. There's a small stash of turnips under the floorboards. You pull one out and slice it into a shallow pot, add a bit of dried barley and a pinch of crushed nettle. It's a sad meal, but warm. You eat slowly, savoring the feeling of steam in your nose. The children wake to the smell, and you share. There's never enough, but somehow it's always just enough. You remember how your grandfather used to say, "The cold teaches you manners." That and the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, but only 3 hours without warmth before your body starts to give up. 3 hours. That's all it takes. So you've learned to count hours like blessings. You've learned how to keep a room warmer by sheer determination. And you've learned how to trick your own brain. You sing soft songs, even ones with no real melody, just rhythmic mutterings. You breathe slow and deep. You think of spring. Sometimes you even press your hands to your face, whisper stories about warmer times, and try to convince your body it's true. It's not true, but it helps. The fire needs more fuel. You toss on a handful of twigs and blow gently. Sparks rise. They remind you of stars, small and fleeting and far too cold. But for a moment, they glow like promise. The morning light filters dimly through your window, but the chill in the air hasn't budged. You stretch your cramped limbs and carefully disentangle yourself from the clustered bodies that share your bed, a tangled mass of siblings, parents, and sometimes even a neighbor's child or two, if the cold is particularly fierce. Privacy is a luxury you rarely enjoy, and warmth is the currency you barter with each night. Your fingers ache, stiff from the cold and the awkward positions required to conserve space. You pull on your layers of clothing, linen shift, woolen tunic, patched cloak, and whatever else has survived the winter. Each piece carries the scent of smoke and damp earth, a reminder of the constant struggle against the elements. The wool itches, but you tolerate it because you know the alternative is worse. Breakfast is a humble affair, a bowl of thin porridge made from barley or oats, boiled in water with perhaps a pinch of salt if you're fortunate. Meat is rare in the winter months, mostly reserved for feast days or special occasions. You eat quickly, aware that lingering too long might mean losing precious body heat. Your hands are wrapped around the bowl, trying to absorb what little warmth it offers. After breakfast, you step outside, bracing yourself against the biting wind. The ground crunches underfoot, frost coating every surface like a delicate lace. Your breath escapes in white clouds, and your cloak billows as you move. Today's task is gathering firewood, a daily ritual essential to survival. The nearby forest is your best source, but the journey is fraught with challenges. The trees stand tall and bare, their skeletal branches scratching at the gray sky. You search for fallen limbs, careful to avoid disturbing the standing trees, as cutting live timber is forbidden by the lord of the manor. You break twigs and gather bark, stuffing them into your cloak. Your hands are numb and the work is slow, but each stick means more warmth tonight. On your way back, you pass neighbors also foraging, sharing nods and brief words. The communal understanding of the harsh season fosters a quiet camaraderie among villagers. Sometimes a barter is made, extra kindling for a bowl of stew or a scrap of fabric. Cooperation is survival. Back at the cottage, you tend the hearth, adding your gathered wood to the smoldering embers. The fire sputters to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The smell of smoke mingles with the earthy scent of the thatch and mud. You prepare a simple stew with dried vegetables, careful to conserve fuel by cooking slowly. The day passes in a rhythm dictated by the cold and the necessities of life. You mend clothes, patch the roof, and keep the animals warm. Chickens huddle in their coop, and the pig snores near the fire, a living heater. The goat chews on a bit of straw, its breath misting in the chilly air. As night falls, the cold returns with renewed vigor. You gather the family close, sharing body heat beneath heavy blankets. The fire burns low, and you listen to the wind's mournful song outside. You close your eyes, focusing on the warmth shared in this small, crowded space. Historians still argue about how much medieval peasants actually suffered from the cold. Some suggest they were hardy, adapted to their environment, and equipped with clever tricks. Others contend that cold-related illnesses were common and often deadly. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. You drift to sleep, comforted by the knowledge that, for now, you have warmth, shelter, and the strength to face another cold night. The early morning arrives like a quiet visitor, barely making its presence known before slipping away again. You awaken slowly, still wrapped in the tangle of woolen blankets that smell faintly of smoke and earth. Remnants of last night's fire and your damp straw bedding. The chill in the air is persistent. It hasn't relented even inside the cottage's thin walls. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the rough wool scratching against your skin, but providing the best defense you have against the creeping cold. Each breath you exhale creates a small, fleeting cloud of mist, a ghostly reminder of the frigid air that envelops your world. You try to move quietly, careful not to disturb the children nestled in the corner of the room. Their slow, rhythmic breathing forms a gentle hum against the cold silence that fills the space. They huddle close together, small bodies pressed for warmth, their cheeks rosy from the residual heat of their shared breaths. The sound of the wind outside grows louder, rattling the wooden shutters that never quite seal the gaps in the walls. The thatched roof above groans softly as it contracts in the freezing air, the straw creaking and settling like a living thing adjusting to the cold. Somewhere in the background, the goat's low bleating blends with the pig's steady snore, creating an oddly comforting soundtrack to your bleak morning. You stand up slowly, muscles stiff and protesting from a night spent half asleep and half shivering. Each movement feels weighted, as if the cold itself has settled into your bones and resists every effort to shake it loose. Your fingers, still numb from the night, fumble as you reach for your patched woolen mittens. The wool is threadbare, worn thin from years of use, but it's all you have to protect your hands from the biting air. You draw your hood up, shielding your face, and step toward the hearth where last night's embers barely glow. The faint warmth from them is almost an insult compared to the cold that invades every corner of the room. You remind yourself of the day ahead long, relentless and unforgiving. There will be chores, tasks that once seemed simple but now feel monumental when done against the backdrop of winter's chill. You will need to fetch water from the well before it freezes solid. The animals will require feeding and care despite the cold, and the thatched roof, already patched and fragile, threatens to leak more with every passing snow. You will mend clothes again, stitch torn hose, patch holes in cloaks, and do it all with numb fingers that make the task more frustrating than usual. Making your way to the small cooking area, you glance at the empty pot hanging over the hearth. Soon, you will fill it with water to boil, preparing the day's first meal-thin porridge, a watery stew, or whatever scraps you can muster. Cooking feels less like nourishment and more like an act of hope, a way to summon warmth into your body and your home. Every small flicker of heat is a victory, every meal a respite. As you prepare to stoke the fire, your thoughts drift to the inventive methods medieval peasants used to fight the cold. You recall old tales of small pouches filled with heated stones, or dried herbs carried in pockets, or tucked into clothing layers. These tiny sources of warmth, though modest, could stave off numbness and bring comfort. Some wore socks woven from animal hair, a rare luxury compared to your patched wool hose. You imagine the care it took to collect and prepare such items, a testament to human ingenuity amid hardship. Historians debate the extent to which peasants had access to these comforts. Some argue that such practices were widespread, born from necessity and passed down through generations. Others suggest they were the privilege of slightly wealthier villagers or romanticized myths that overlook the harsher realities faced by the poorest. What remains clear is the resilience and creativity needed to survive a medieval winter, when even the simplest warmth was a lifeline. You glance outside, watching the slow crawl of dawn as it stretches its pale fingers across the sky. The light offers little warmth, a mere tease of the sun's promise, but it carries hope. Like the seasons themselves, this cold too shall pass, making way for gentler days and longer nights lit by stars rather than the cold blue frost. Preparing to face the day, you wrap your cloak more securely, adjust your mittens, and step outside. The air hits you like a wall, sharp and unyielding. The ground crunches beneath your boots, frost glinting on every surface. Your breath escapes in soft clouds, drifting away into the morning. You head toward the well, muscles aching but determined. The walk is familiar yet daunting. Each step demands effort, the cold sapping your energy and testing your resolve. Along the way, you see neighbors also beginning their day, faces red from the cold, hands busy with tasks to keep their families alive. There is a silent understanding among you, each person a thread in a fragile web of survival. Reaching the well, you lower the bucket into the icy depths, careful not to let it freeze before you can bring the water home. The liquid feels like a treasure, precious and essential. You lift the bucket, muscles straining against the weight, and begin the slow trek back. On your way, you pass through the village center, where small fires flicker in iron braziers, casting soft glows against the dark timber buildings. You exchange brief greetings with others, sharing news, goods, and sometimes a laugh of balm against the cold and hardship. These moments of community are small sparks that keep the spirit alive during long winters. Back at your cottage, you tend the fire once more, coaxing the embers to life with gentle breaths and careful placement of twigs and peat. The smoke curls upward, carrying with it the scent of earth and wood, mingling with the faint aroma of drying herbs hanging from the rafters. The fire's warmth pushes back the cold, if only temporarily, and you gather the children closer. You ladle the hot porridge into bowls, its steam warming your fingers as you distribute it. The children eat quietly, savoring the rare comfort of a warm meal. You watch them, grateful for these small moments of peace amidst the harshness. As the day stretches on, the cycle of work and warmth continues. You mend, cook, gather, and care, each task a link in the chain holding your family together. The cold remains a constant companion, but so too does your determination. Night falls again, and the cycle repeats. You huddle near the hearth, sharing stories and warmth. The wind sings its mournful song outside, but inside, surrounded by family, you find solace. The cold teaches you patience and endurance. It teaches you to find warmth in the smallest things, a shared breath, a flickering flame, the rough wool of a cloak. It teaches you to value each day, each ember, each heartbeat. And so you live, wrapped in layers of cloth and hope, facing each winter as it comes, knowing that spring will arrive again, carrying the promise of warmth and renewal. The morning light creeps softly through the frosted window panes, casting pale shadows across the cold earthen floor of your cottage. You awaken slowly, the chill lingering in the air, refusing to yield even to the thin glow of dawn. Your body aches from the restless night, muscles stiffened from lying still in cramped positions that conserve warmth. The blankets are coarse and itchy but precious. You can still feel the residual heat from the children's bodies pressed close beside you, though the cold has already begun to creep back in. As you pull yourself up from the narrow straw-filled mattress, the first breath you exhale forms a small cloud, vanishing quickly in the frigid air. The thin glass of the window rattles faintly with the winter wind, a reminder that the outside world remains locked in icy silence. You glance around the modest room, the cracked walls made of timber and mud, the rough-hewn table bearing scratches from years of use, the bundle of dried herbs hanging from the rafter above the hearth. The children are still asleep, bundled together in ragged blankets in the corner. Their faces are flushed from shared warmth, soft breaths steady despite the cold. You envy their ability to sleep through the biting chill, though you know their small bodies lose heat far faster than yours. Quietly, so as not to wake them, you begin your morning routine. First, the animals. Livestock aren't just sources of food. In winter, they are living heaters. You tread carefully toward their pens, your feet wrapped in multiple layers of cloth, though the chill still bites through. The pig grunts softly, snuffling the straw bedding with visible breath vaporizing into the cold air. Chickens huddle together in their coop, feathers fluffed to trap precious warmth, while the goat eyes you suspiciously from her stall. You ruffle the goat's coarse hair, murmuring a soft greeting, and offer the little feed you have managed to save from summer harvests. The pig snorts happily, content in its warm straw bed, while the chickens squabble quietly, seeking the warmest corner. Outside, the ground is hard and solid, a thick crust of ice and frost covering every surface. The snow, which fell heavily overnight, muffles the usual village sounds, creating an eerie stillness. You breathe deeply, tasting the cold air as you step toward the edge of the nearby forest. The tall, skeletal trees stand stark against the gray sky, their bare branches like bony fingers reaching upward. Today's task is as critical as ever, gathering firewood. The freshly fallen snow has hidden the familiar piles of dry branches and twigs, and the icy ground makes footing treacherous. Every scrap of dry wood you collect is precious, fuel for the hearth that wards off freezing toes and numb fingers. As you break off brittle twigs, the crisp snap echoes in the silence. You gather bark peeling from fallen logs and tuck bits of dry moss into your cloak. The cold has seeped into your bones, your breath coming in short, visible puffs. You move slowly but with purpose, knowing that your family's survival depends on this daily pilgrimage. The forest is a place of uneasy comfort. It provides warmth but also danger. Wolves are said to prowl closer in winter months, their haunting howls slicing through the night air. Tales of villagers lost to wolf attacks circulate, some dismissing them as warnings to keep children indoors, others insisting on their truth. You keep a wary eye on the tree line, aware of shadows that seem to flicker just beyond sight. Historians still argue how prevalent wolf encounters truly were and how medieval villagers managed the risk. Some believe that well-organized hunting parties and the proximity of human settlements kept predators at bay, while others suggest that wolves thrived in the margins, emboldened by winter scarcity. The truth likely falls somewhere between these views, but the fear lingers. You collect as much dry wood as you can carry, careful not to overburden yourself on the slippery ground. Each stick is a hard-won treasure. You retrace your steps, the weight of your bundle pulling at your back as your breath clouds the cold air. Returning to your cottage, the faint glow of embers greets you. You gently add your gathered wood to the fire, coaxing it back to life with careful breaths. The flames leap up, casting flickering shadows on the rough walls and warming the room with a gentle glow. The scent of smoke mingles with the earthiness of damp wool and the faint herbal fragrance from drying bundles hung near the hearth. You prepare a pot of thin stew, adding whatever root vegetables remain and a pinch of dried herbs. The broth will barely fill stomachs, but will warm the body and soothe the spirit. Gathering the children close, you distribute bowls of the meager stew. Their small hands clasp the bowls tightly, faces lit by firelight and hope. They whisper of springtime and warmer days, sharing dreams that keep the cold at bay. Outside, the wind begins to rise again, rattling the shutters and sending icy drafts crawling beneath the door. You feed the fire carefully, watching as the flames crackle and leap higher. The animals settle into their corners, the steady rhythm of their breathing a comforting background hum. The cold teaches lessons beyond mere endurance, patience, community, and the value of small comforts. It teaches you to treasure the flicker of a flame, the softness of shared blankets, and the strength found in togetherness. Though the winter nights are long and unforgiving, each dawn offers a glimmer of survival. As you close your eyes, the fire's warmth kisses your face and you surrender to sleep. Outside, the world remains frozen and silent, but inside, surrounded by the flickering light and loved ones, a fragile peace persists. The first light of dawn is a pale glow filtering weakly through the gaps in the wooden shutters. It barely warms the cold, damp air inside your small cottage. You awake slowly, your body stiff and sore from hours spent huddled under thick, coarse blankets that only partly keep out the persistent chill. The sharp bite of winter lingers in the room, wrapping itself around everything like an invisible shroud. You can hear the faint, steady breathing of the children still asleep nearby, their soft exhalations of fragile rhythm in the quiet. Raising yourself carefully from the narrow straw-stuffed mattress, you feel the familiar ache of joints tightened from cold and long hours spent almost motionless. The mattress is rough and uneven, yet it is the only bed you've ever known, woven from dried grasses and hay. Stuffed into a wooden frame that creaks under the slightest movement, you pull your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders. The wool, though scratchy, is your best defense against the creeping cold. Your breath escapes in small clouds, drifting up and quickly disappearing into the chilly air. The fire from last night is reduced to glowing embers, barely giving off warmth. The hearth cold and empty, except for the faint smell of smoke lingering in the stones. You step softly over the floor strewn with straw and bits of cloth, careful not to disturb the children. They are huddled close together, bundled in layers of worn fabric, their faces flushed faintly from the warmth of their shared bodies. The small wooden table holds a rough-hewn bowl and spoon, waiting to be filled. Soon, you'll prepare the morning porridge thin and barely nourishing, but warm enough to chase away the worst of the cold from your insides. You begin by blowing gently on the embers, coaxing them to flare, feeding the fire with small twigs and scraps of dry wood. The flames sputter to life, casting flickering shadows that dance across the walls, lighting the worn tapestries and the bundles of drying herbs hanging from the rafters. As the porridge simmers, your thoughts wander to the ingenious methods peasants have long used to battle the cold beyond the obvious layering of clothing and close proximity to the hearth. You recall stories passed down about small heated stones carefully warmed by the fire and wrapped in cloth to be carried in pockets or nestled under blankets, radiating comforting warmth to numb fingers and feet. Some families stuffed their socks with dried grass or even animal hair, creating a primitive insulation against the biting chill. You remember your own attempts to tuck small pouches of lavender or mugwort beneath your cloak, both for the pleasant scent and, according to old wives' tales, to keep winter illnesses at bay. The exact prevalence of these practices is still a matter of debate among historians. Some argue that such customs were widespread, born out of necessity and passed along as valuable wisdom. Others suggest they were rare luxuries, limited to wealthier villagers, or simply romanticized fragments of a harsher reality. What is indisputable, however, is the quiet creativity and resourcefulness that winter survival demanded. The children stir as the sweet, warm smell of porridge fills the room. Their sleepy eyes blink open, and they reach for the bowls you hand out. Their small hands wrap around the wooden vessels, warmth radiating back into their chilled fingers. They eat quietly, savoring the heat more than the meager flavor. Their rosy cheeks and the soft glow of the firelight bring a brief warmth to your heart amid the bleakness of winter. Outside, the village begins to rouse beneath the heavy blanket of snow. Footsteps crunch on the frozen earth as neighbors set out on their daily routines. The air is filled with a muted stillness, the snow absorbing sound and light alike. Trees stand as silent sentinels, branches heavy with frost and ice, their skeletal outlines stark against the gray sky. Your next task awaits, tending the animals. In these harsh months, your livestock are not just sources of food, but vital living heaters. You move toward their pens, feet wrapped tightly to fend off frostbite. The pig grunts contentedly in a nest of straw, steam rising from its nostrils into the cold air. The chickens fluff their feathers into thick balls of warmth, seeking shelter in the coop's darkest corners. The goat, ever cautious, eyes you suspiciously but accepts a handful of hay from your calloused hand. The cold outside feels almost alive, a force pressing in against every surface, every crack in the walls, every gap beneath the door. The thatched roof groans under the weight of heavy snow, threatening to leak and let the winter inside. You silently curse the inevitable repairs that spring will demand, knowing that the cold months stretch ahead with little relief. Later, you settle by the wooden table with needle and thread to mend tattered hooks and hose. The task is slow and painstaking, your fingers stiff and uncooperative in the cold. Every patch you sew is a shield against the unforgiving winter, a small act of defiance in the face of hardship. As you work, you recall how some peasants layered their clothing not just for warmth, but as a form of armor, protecting themselves from the elements and the wear of daily toil. Evening approaches with a sharp drop in temperature. The wind returns with renewed fury, rattling shutters and sending icy drafts skittering across the floor. The animals settle into their corners, their breaths a steady rhythm mingling with the crackling fire. The children gather near you, their voices hushed as you share old stories, tales of summers past, of fields ripe with grain, and of spring's gentle promise. The cold teaches you to appreciate the smallest comforts, the flicker of a candle, the softness of shared blankets, the warmth of a family clustered close. It humbles you, reminding you that survival depends not on strength alone, but on patience, resilience, and community. As night deepens, you sit near the hearth, the firelight casting long shadows on the walls. The wind's mournful song drifts through the cracks, but inside, surrounded by flickering warmth and loved ones, you find a fragile peace. You close your eyes, feeling the slow return of warmth to your tired limbs and letting sleep pull you gently into dreams of spring and renewal. The morning arrives like a pale whisper, the sky outside your window a dull canvas of gray clouds, thick with the promise of more snow. The air inside your cottage remains cold, stubbornly holding on to the night's chill despite the fire burning low in the hearth. You awaken slowly, limbs stiff and senses dulled by the relentless cold. The rough straw mattress beneath you offers little comfort, and the heavy blankets layered over your body feel as much a burden as a blessing. You shift carefully, mindful not to disturb the children sleeping nearby. Their small faces are flushed with warmth from shared bodies pressed close, but you know the cold still gnaws at them. The scent of smoke mingles with damp earth and the faint aroma of dried herbs hanging overhead. You take a deep breath, feeling the sting of icy air as it fills your lungs. Your first task is to stoke the fire, coaxing life back into the glowing embers with gentle breaths and carefully placed kindling. The flames flicker to life, casting soft light and a fragile warmth that begins to push back the cold, stubborn grip. The room brightens slightly, and you feel a small comfort in the glow, knowing this flame will ward off the worst of the chill, at least for now. You prepare a simple meal of porridge, stirring the grain slowly in a pot over the fire. The thick steam rising warms your face, and the sound of bubbling water is a welcome respite from the silent cold. You think of the endless repetition of these small tasks, the daily rituals that shape your life in winter. Each chore is a battle against the cold, a step toward survival. After breakfast, you dress in layers of rough wool and linen, each piece worn and patched from seasons past. The clothing is scratchy and heavy, but essential. You pull your cloak tight, wrap a scarf around your neck, and pull a woolen cap low over your ears. Your fingers, red and cracked from the cold, fumble with your boots, tightening the worn leather straps. Outside, the snow crunches beneath your feet, the world muted and still beneath a blanket of white. The wind blows in gusts, sharp and biting, driving icy needles into your skin despite your heavy clothing. You make your way toward the village well, knowing that water is essential, yet fetching it in winter is one of the hardest tasks. The path is slippery and uneven, hidden beneath fresh snow and treacherous ice. You move carefully, the cold seeping through even the thick solace of your boots. The well stands as a dark hole in the frozen earth, its wooden frame weathered and cracked. You lower the bucket into the icy depths, your hands trembling as you pull it up, the weight of water a precious burden. The return journey is slow and cautious, each step a reminder of winter's harshness. You pass neighbors also tending to their daily routines, faces pale and red from the cold, hands busy with tasks that must be done despite the biting air. There is a quiet understanding between you, a shared resilience and an unspoken camaraderie. Back at the cottage, you add the water to the cooking pot, preparing a thin stew to warm the family. The fire crackles and pops, its heat a balm against the cold that invades every corner. You gather the children close, their small bodies radiating warmth and hope. As the day wears on, you tend to the animals, checking on the pig, chickens, and goat. Their breaths mist in the cold air, and you ruffle their fur and feathers, offering whatever feed remains. The animals, like you, endure the winter's hardships, their survival intertwined with your own. You spend hours mending clothes, repairing holes in cloaks and hose, each stitch a small act of defiance against the relentless cold. Your fingers move slowly, stiff from cold and weariness, but steady. The task is tedious, but necessary. As evening falls, the cold deepens and the wind's mournful song rises once more. You gather the family near the hearth, sharing stories and quiet moments. The flickering firelight dances on faces tired but resolute. The cold outside is fierce, but inside, wrapped in blankets and mauve, there's warmth. The cold teaches you to cherish the smallest comforts, the glow of a fire, the softness of wool, the closeness of family. It humbles you, reminding you that survival is woven from patience, courage, and the gentle strength found in togetherness. You close your eyes, letting the fire's warmth soothe your tired body, and drift into a restless sleep, carried by dreams of spring's promise and the hope of warmer days ahead. The gray dawn seeps through the gaps in your cottage's wooden walls, diffusing cold light into the still room where you lie awake. The air is crisp and sharp, every breath a visible puff that lingers for a moment before fading into silence. You feel the weight of winter pressing down outside. The land is cloaked in snow and ice, And inside, warmth is a fragile, fleeting thing. You rise slowly, muscles stiff from the cold night, and your bare feet meet the frozen floor with a jolt. You glance toward the hearth, where faint red embers barely glow. The fire from last night's meager blaze is dying, and you know that without fresh fuel, the chill will soon reclaim the cottage. Your hands, rough and cracked from constant exposure to frost, reach instinctively for the pile of wood stacked near the door. Each piece is precious, gathered and hoarded like treasure through months of harsh weather. You feed the embers carefully, blowing softly to coax sparks into flame. The fire grows slowly, its warmth expanding outwards like a small sun in the cold gloom. The familiar scent of smoke and burning wood fills the room, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs hung from the rafters, sage, rosemary, and a hint of lavender used not only for cooking and medicine, but believed to ward off illness during the long winter months. The ritual of tending the fire is a comforting one, a moment of control in a world otherwise dominated by hardship and cold. You pour water into a pot and set it over the flames, waiting for the morning's porridge to bubble gently. The steam curls upward, a warm tendril that seems almost alive against the starkness of the winter dawn. As you prepare the simple meal, your thoughts turn to the ingenious ways medieval peasants kept themselves warm when firewood was scarce. You recall stories passed down through generations, how some villagers wrapped heated stones in cloth and slipped them into beds or pockets, using the stored heat to stave off numbness. Others lined their homes with rushes and straw to insulate against drafts, and some fashioned makeshift quilts from scraps of cloth, sewing layer upon layer to trap the precious heat inside. Historians still argue about how widespread these practices were, debating whether these methods were common folk wisdom or reserved for the slightly better off. Some suggest that what we think of as medieval comforts were often sporadic and precarious, while others believe communities shared knowledge widely as a survival tactic. Regardless, these efforts reveal a quiet, persistent ingenuity people doing everything possible to push back against the brutal cold. The children stir, drawn awake by the warmth and the aroma of food. Their eyes blink sleepily, faces flushed from shared blankets and the faint heat of the hearth. You hand out bowls of porridge, the thin gruel a welcome comfort in a world so often bitter and unforgiving. They eat quietly, savoring the rare sensation of warmth flowing through their bodies. Outside, the village begins to stir beneath a sky heavy with snow clouds. Footsteps crunch on frost-hardened paths as neighbors take up their daily tasks, faces rosy and weathered from cold exposure. The sounds of lifelong conversations, the clucking of chickens, the bleating of goats are muted by the thick blanket of snow that dulls sound and light alike. Your next chore is to check on the animals, vital companions, and sources of warmth during the endless winter months. The pig snuffles contentedly in its bed of straw, steam rising with each breath. The chickens huddle in the coop, feathers fluffed to trap every ounce of heat. The goat nuzzles your hand, grateful for the extra ration of feed you carry. The cold outside is relentless, a living presence pressing against every surface. The thatched roof groans under the weight of snow, threatening to cave in. The walls, made of timber and mud, hold little against the biting air that seeps through cracks and gaps. You remind yourself that every small act, mending a cloak, patching a window, stacking firewood, builds a fragile barrier against winter's assault. Later, you sit by the hearth, stitching patches onto a cloak. The needle moves slowly, your fingers stiff and trembling from cold and fatigue. Every stitch is a small victory, a defense against the chill that seeps into bones and spirit alike. You recall stories of villagers layering their clothing like armor, multiple tunics, woolen undergarments, thick cloaks, all designed to trap heat and protect from wind. As night falls, the wind picks up again, rattling the shutters and sending icy drafts skittering across the floor. The animals settle into their corners, their breaths forming small clouds in the cold air. The children gather close, whispering stories of warmer days, their voices soft in the firelight. You listen, heart heavy with a mix of hope and weariness. The cold teaches patience and humility, reminding you that survival is a fragile dance, one made possible by ingenuity, endurance, and the small comforts of home. The fire flickers low, its glow casting long shadows. You close your eyes, letting the warmth seep into your bones, and drift into a sleep filled with dreams of spring's gentle return. The gray morning light filters softly through the frost-covered windows of your cottage, casting a pale, muted glow over the familiar, worn furnishings. The chill that has settled deep within the walls seems to seep into every corner, wrapping the room in a quiet, persistent cold that no firewood can fully dispel. You awaken slowly, your body heavy and stiff, muscles tight from the long hours spent curled beneath rough blankets that offer little more than thin insulation against the biting winter air. The children lie close beside you, their small breaths visible in the cold air, faces flushed pink from shared warmth. Their limbs twitch gently in sleep, seeking comfort from one another and the faint heat radiating from the dying embers in the hearth. You shift carefully, mindful not to disturb their fragile rest, and you rise to face the day ahead, another endless struggle against the cold that seems determined to claim the season. Your first act is the familiar one, kindling the fire back to life. You gather the small pile of precious kindling you have managed to save and, with practiced patience, coax the glowing embers into flickering flames. The hearth sputters and sparks, a small beacon of warmth in the otherwise frigid room. The smell of smoke and burning wood fills the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs hung from the rafters, sage, rosemary, and lavender, all believed to ward off illness and bring comfort during the long winter months. As the fire grows stronger, you place a pot of water over the flames, preparing the thin porridge that will be the family's morning meal. The steam rises gently, warming the room slightly and bringing a welcome scent of warmth to the cold morning. The children begin to stir, drawn awake by the familiar sounds and smells of the hearth. You hand out bowls of porridge, watching as their small hands wrap around the warm wooden vessels. They eat quietly, savoring the heat as much as the bland taste, the simple meal a comfort amid the hardships of winter. Their flushed cheeks and soft smiles bring a flicker of warmth to your heart, a reminder of the resilience that carries you through these harsh months. Outside, the village is cloaked in snow, the landscape a silent expanse of white under a sky heavy with clouds. Footsteps crunch over frozen ground as neighbors set out on their daily routines, faces pale and weathered from exposure to cold winds. The trees stand bare and skeletal, their branches thick with frost, the air crisp and sharp with the promise of more snow to come. You step outside, pulling your cloak tightly around your shoulders, your breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The cold bites at any exposed skin, and despite your layers of wool and linen, you can feel it settling deep into your bones. Your destination is the woods at the village edge, a source of firewood and other resources essential to survival during winter. The path is treacherous beneath the snow and ice, each step requiring careful balance to avoid slips and falls. You carry a bundle of tools, a small axe, a knife, and a sack for gathering kindling, and move steadily into the trees. The muffled silence of the forest, broken only by the crackling of twigs beneath your feet and the distant call of a crow. Gathering firewood is a task both familiar and fraught with challenges. The fresh snowfall has hidden many of the usual sources of dry wood, and the branches you find are often brittle and heavy with ice. You work slowly, carefully breaking off small pieces that will burn without overwhelming the fragile fire in your hearth. The forest, while a vital source of warmth, also holds its dangers. Wolves are said to roam closer during the winter months, drawn by the scent of livestock and the scarcity of prey. Their haunting howls echo through the trees, a chilling reminder of the wild that presses just beyond the edges of human settlement. Stories abound of villagers lost to wolf attacks, though some dismiss these as exaggerated warnings. Historians still debate the frequency and severity of these encounters, but the fear remains a constant companion. As you gather wood, you keep a watchful eye on the shadows, ears alert for any unusual sounds. The weight of the bundle in your arms grows heavier with each piece added, but you know every stick counts. Without fuel for the fire, warmth will fail, and the long nights will become unbearable. Returning to the village, you navigate the slippery path with care, the cold seeping through your layers despite your best efforts. Back in the cottage, you arrange the wood near the hearth, stacking it carefully to dry and be ready for the evening's fire. You feed the flames, watching as they leap higher, casting a comforting glow over the room. The animals require attention next. They are more than livestock. In winter, they serve as living heaters, their bodies radiating precious warmth. You check on the pig nestled in a bed of straw, its breath fogging the air. The chickens are clustered tightly in the coop, feathers fluffed against the cold. The goat nuzzles your hand, accepting the extra feed you offer with a grateful bleat. Tending to animals in winter is a constant balancing act, ensuring they have enough food and shelter without overextending your limited resources. Their survival is tied to yours, and every care you provide is an investment in warmth and sustenance for the long nights ahead. As the day fades into evening, you return indoors to mend clothes. Your fingers, numb from the cold, work slowly but steadily to patch torn cloaks and hose. The needle moves through rough wool and linen, each stitch a small victory against the harsh elements. Clothing was not only protection, but a form of armor, and layering was essential to trapping heat and shielding from icy winds. The fire crackles as the children gather near, their voices low as you share old tales of warmer days and spring's inevitable return. The flickering light paints their faces with soft shadows, and for a moment, the cold seems to retreat beyond the walls. The wind's mournful song rises again, rattling shutters and sending icy drafts along the floor. Yet inside, wrapped in blankets and love, there is warmth, a fragile, precious thing sustained by firelight and family. As you close your eyes, the slow return of warmth to your limbs soothes your weary body, and sleep carries you gently into dreams of renewal and hope. The gray dawn seeps slowly through the narrow cracks of your cottage's wooden shutters, painting everything in a cold, muted light. Outside, the sky is a heavy blanket of swirling clouds, thick with snow yet to fall. The world is muffled under the weight of winter's grip, quiet except for the faint howl of the wind weaving between the timber-framed houses. Inside, the cold clings stubbornly to the walls, creeping under doors and settling deep into the air you breathe. You awaken slowly, your body heavy with weariness and the lingering chill of night. The straw mattress beneath you is hard and uneven, offering little comfort, while the woolen blankets piled atop your frame provide only a modest defense against the icy drafts. Your fingers feel stiff and cracked, the familiar ache of frostbite just beginning to set in despite your best efforts. The children, huddled close nearby, lie still and warm, their tiny breaths clouding the frigid air. Rising carefully, you pad across the rough wooden floor, the straw crunching softly beneath your bare feet. The hearth's embers glow faintly, a red, pulsing heart in the cold room. With practiced hands, you gather kindling saved from better days and blow gently on the dying flame. Sparks leap and flames grow, casting a flickering glow that chases shadows across the uneven walls. The fire's warmth spreads slowly but surely, wrapping the room in a fragile embrace. You hang a pot over the flames and begin preparing the morning's meal, a thin porridge made from coarse grains, boiled slowly to stretch limited supplies. The smell of warm grain and burning wood mingles with the faint herbal scent of dried sage. Rosemary and lavender hung from rafters, herbs believed to ward off winter illnesses and lift spirits in the dark months. The children begin to stir, drawn awake by the flickering light and rising warmth. Their small hands reach for wooden bowls, cupping the hot porridge as though it might vanish if they loosen their grasp. They eat quietly, cheeks flushed not only from the heat, but from the simple comfort of nourishment after a long, cold night. Watching them, you feel a tender mix of pride and pride in their resilience, worry about the weeks yet to come. Outside, the village awakens beneath a soft blanket of snow. The world is transformed into a monochrome landscape, trees bowed under icy weights, rooftops dusted white and fields hidden beneath a thick, frozen quilt. Footsteps crunch over the frost-hardened earth as neighbors begin their daily routines, faces pale and red from exposure to biting winds. The usual clatter and chatter is subdued, muted by the snow's muffling embrace. You wrap your thick cloak tight and step outside, your breath swirling in clouds before you. The cold nips at any exposed skin, a sharp reminder of winter's unrelenting presence. You make your way toward the animal pens, where the sounds of low grunts and clucks reach your ears, even through the cold stillness. The pig nestles deep in straw, its breath steaming in the icy air. The chickens huddle close in their coop, feathers puffed to trap every scrap of heat. The goat, ever watchful, eyes you cautiously before stepping forward to nuzzle your outstretched hand. These animals are more than livestock. They are living reservoirs of warmth, their bodies radiating heat that helps keep your family alive through the harsh months. Tending animals in winter is a delicate balance. Food is scarce, and you ration carefully, supplementing with hay and whatever scraps remain. The shelters are reinforced with straw and mud, the only protection against the merciless wind. You pause to smooth the thick fur of the goat, appreciating the warmth and companionship it offers on these bleak days. Your next task is gathering firewood, a necessity for survival, but an increasingly difficult chore. The forest is distant and treacherous, paths hidden beneath fresh snow and treacherous ice. You bundle yourself tightly, pulling your scarf over your nose to shield from the biting air. The woods are silent, but for the occasional creak of frozen branches and the crunch of your footsteps. The air is heavy with cold, sharp, and biting against your skin, despite layers of clothing. Every piece of dry wood you find is a small victory, a prize against the winter's relentlessness. You remember tales of heated stones wrapped in cloth, how peasants warmed their beds with these simple wonders, pressing them close against chilled bodies to stave off frostbite and restless nights. Historians debate just how common such practices were, but there's no denying the quiet inventiveness born from necessity. Every scrap of warmth, every layered garment, every patch sewn with care is part of a collective human story of endurance. Back at the cottage, you stack the gathered wood near the hearth, careful to keep it dry and ready for the evening's fire. You then settle down with needle and thread to mend the torn cloaks and hose worn thin by daily toil. The needle bites into rough wool and linen, moving slowly through stiff fingers numbed by cold. Each stitch is a small act of resistance against the unforgiving season. Evening falls early in winter's grasp, the sky darkening to a deep slate before night fully arrives. The wind rises again, howling through the village like a restless spirit. You gather your family close to the hearth, wrapping blankets tight and sharing stories by the flickering firelight. The children's eyes grow heavy with sleep as you recount tales of warmer days and distant springs. The cold presses on from outside, relentless and unforgiving. But here within these walls, wrapped in the fragile warmth of fire and family, there is a peace born of shared struggle and quiet hope. As you close your eyes, the fire's glow softens and warmth seeps into your bones. You drift slowly into sleep, carried gently on dreams of renewal and the promise of spring's return. The gray light of early dawn filters softly through the narrow slats of your cottage's shutters, casting a muted glow on the frost-lined window panes. Outside, the world is still and silent, blanketed in snow that stretches like a pale sea beneath a heavy, laden sky. You wake slowly, the chill seeping deep into your bones despite the layers of coarse wool and linen wrapped tightly around you. The rough straw mattress beneath offers little comfort, yet it has cradled your family through countless nights, steadfast and unyielding like the land itself. Your limbs ache with the lingering cold, joints stiff from the endless battle against winter's grasp. The blankets feel heavy on your frame, a coarse cocoon that provides some shelter from the biting air that presses through the cracks in the walls. Near you, the children lie still, their breath visible in faint clouds that mingle with the dust motes in the pale morning light. Their faces, flushed from shared warmth, are peaceful in sleep, a fragile respite from the harsh world beyond these four walls. You rise carefully, mindful of the delicate balance between warmth and cold, light and shadow. Your feet meet the frozen wooden floor with a slight shiver, the chill a reminder of the night's persistence. The hearth holds a faint glow, embers pulsing softly with the heart of your home. You gather kindling saved from better days, small sticks and brittle twigs, and coax the dying flame back to life with gentle breaths. Sparks leap eagerly, flames climbing the dry wood and filling the room with a golden glow that chases away the lingering shadows. The fire's warmth spreads slowly but surely, wrapping the space in a fragile embrace. You hang a pot over the flames, filling it with water to prepare the morning's porridge, a simple gruel of coarse grains boiled to stretch limited supplies. The steam rises in gentle curls, carrying the faint aroma of toasted grain, mingled with the subtle scents of dried herbs, sage, rosemary, and lavender that hang from the rafters. These herbs are more than decoration. They are talismans against sickness and malaise, believed to purify the air and soothe weary spirits during the long, dark months. The children begin to stir, drawn awake by the flickering light and the promise of warmth. Their small hands reach for wooden bowls, cupping the hot porridge as if it were liquid gold. They eat quietly, savoring the heat and sustenance after a night steeped in cold. Watching them, you feel a swelling of tender pride, mixed with the ever-present worry about what the coming days will bring. Outside, the village is cloaked in white. Snow drapes every surface, softening edges and muffling sounds, creating a world that feels both magical and relentless. Trees stand like sentinels, their bare branches heavy with frost, the earth beneath locked in frozen silence. Footsteps crunch across hardened snow as neighbors begin their routines, faces etched with lines carved by wind and hardship, eyes bright with quiet determination. You pull your cloak tighter, the wool coarse but essential, and step out into the cold. Your breath swirls in icy clouds, mingling with the sharp air as you make your way toward the animal pens. The familiar sounds of life greet you, the low grunt of the pig nestled deep in straw, the soft clucking of chickens huddled together in their coop, and the cautious bleat of the goat watching you approach. These creatures are more than food or labor. They are living hearths, their warm bodies radiating heat that sustains your family's fragile existence. You stroke the pig's bristly hide, feeling the steady warmth beneath. The chickens fluff their feathers, creating layers of insulation that trap precious warmth. The goat nuzzles your hand, a small comfort against the bitter cold. Tending to animals in winter is a constant negotiation with scarcity. Feed is rationed carefully, supplemented with dried hay and scraps. The animals' shelters reinforced against wind and snow with layers of straw and mud. Their survival is intimately bound to your own, each warm breath and beating heart a small defiance against the encroaching frost. After completing the chores, you turn to the task of gathering firewood, a labor that grows more arduous as winter deepens. The forest lies just beyond the village's edge, a silent expanse of ice-laden trees and snow-draped undergrowth. Paths are obscured beneath fresh snowfall, and the threat of hidden ice patches adds danger to each step. You bundle yourself tightly in layers of wool and linen, pulling a scarf over your nose and cheeks to shield against the biting wind. The woods are hushed, broken only by the crunch of your footsteps and the occasional creak of heavy branches weighed down by ice. Each piece of dry wood you find is a treasure, a vital resource to feed the hearth's flames. You remember tales of heated stones wrapped in cloth, pressed close to bodies in bed to stave off frostbite and restless sleep, simple ingenuity born from necessity. While historians debate how widespread these practices were, the persistence of such stories speaks to a shared human resilience. Carrying your bundle of kindling and larger logs, you return cautiously along slippery paths, muscles tired but determined. Back home, you stack the wood carefully near the hearth, protecting it from damp and readying it for the long night ahead. The fire is rekindled, its flickering light a balm against the dark and cold that press in from all sides. You settle in to mend worn clothing, cloaks patched from years of wear, hose repaired from countless snags and tears. Your fingers, stiff from the cold and labor, move steadily as the needle pierces rough wool and coarse linen. Each stitch strengthens not only the garment, but the fragile shield against winter's relentless assault. As evening falls early, the village is swallowed in twilight, the sky a deepening blue-gray. The wind rises again, moaning softly through the village like a restless spirit. You gather your family close to the hearth, wrapping blankets tight and sharing whispered stories of spring's return and the promise of warmer days. The children's eyes grow heavy with sleep as firelight dances across their faces, casting soft shadows that flicker on the wooden walls. Outside, winter's grip remains unyielding. The cold is a constant companion, relentless and unforgiving. Yet within these walls, warmed by fire and the closeness of family, there is peace. The small comforts, the crackling fire, the shared meal. The quiet stories are the fragile threads weaving survival into the fabric of your days. As you close your eyes, the slow return of warmth to your limbs soothes your weary body. The fire's glow softens, and sleep carries you gently into dreams filled with the gentle stirrings of renewal, the faint whisper of thawing earth, and the tender hope of spring's embrace. The fire's glow dims softly as the room settles into a gentle hush. Outside, the wind murmurs quietly, a soothing lullaby that wraps the night in a blanket of calm. You feel the slow warmth return to your body, a tender easing of the cold that once pressed so harshly against your skin. The weight of the day's struggles gently fades, replaced by a quiet peace that fills the space between each breath. Your mind drifts with the ember's fading light, thoughts becoming soft and slow like the gentle flicker on the hearth. The stories you've heard, the small acts of warmth and care that kept families alive through harsh winters, settle like a comforting quilt around your senses. It's a reminder that even in the coldest times, resilience and tenderness quietly endure. With every breath, your body relaxes deeper into rest. The sounds of the night's soft crackling flames, distant rustling, the whispered sigh of the wind blend into a steady, calming rhythm. The chill recedes further now, leaving only a gentle warmth, a fragile glow to carry you softly into sleep. As your eyes close, imagine the slow thaw of spring just beyond the horizon, the tender buds, the warming sun, the soft green renewal waiting patiently. Let the quiet hope of those coming days settle deep within you, a gentle promise to carry through the night. Now, rest easy. The cold is held at bay for now, and the warmth of hearth and heart will guard your dreams until morning's light. Sweet dreams.